One of the best iPad even now is the M1 iPad Air, which can also be termed as the 2022 iPad Air or even the 5th gen iPad Air. It's not a new device anymore, and it might be replaced soon by a spec bumped iPad Air, but as of now, this is a perfect iPad if you're planning to get an iPad. But that said, based on rumors, the next iPad Air might launch in a month or so, and because of that, one thing I would surely suggest is to wait till that, because for sure you can then get this M1 iPad Air for a better deal than ever. Now, iPads as a whole can be described as a product that is a blend of a media consumption device as well as a bit of productivity device. And to me, this is never a laptop replacement, but as a specific use case device, iPads has their advantages, and this M1 version of the iPad Air is the best iPad I have used. Now, the iPad Pro version is surely better than this, but their price is really high, and for that, considering a price to value ratio, I'll surely prefer this iPad. And since this one has the M1 chipset, it still, even in 2024, works great because remember, this iPad Air was launched in March 2022, so it's like almost 2 years old. But as I was saying, this iPad is really good for almost all the iPad stuff. And in that, let's begin with the obvious advantage, which is for media consumption. And for that, this 10.9-inch LCD display is a pretty good one. It has a resolution of 2360 by 1640, which gives a pixel density of 264 ppi, and in real life use scenario, it's a pretty sharp display with good colors and neat viewing angles. Now, since this is a display that we keep at a sufficient distance and watch media or play games or read something, well, for all those things, the experience is immersive. And nowadays, I have started using iPads more, and hence this device has become my go-to media consumption device. Because if I want to watch a YouTube video or read through a web article, I just use my iPad Air M1. And hence, even now for this specific use case, well, this iPad Air is good. But that doesn't mean that the display is perfect, because the refresh rate is just 60 Hz, which is fine, but then while using outdoors, the display doesn't get plenty bright. If it's like a coffee shop, the display's brightness level is fine enough, but if it's a proper outdoor scenario, the 500 nits peak brightness is not high enough. Now, like media consumption, a very important use case scenario with an iPad is for playing games and doing a bit of productivity like photo editing, video editing, organizing spreadsheets, editing a Word document, etc. And for all those stuff, the iPad Air M1 is a perfect device because here the M1 chipset used has more than enough horsepower to easily do all these stuff. Games are lag free and smooth, and the iPad doesn't generate much heat while playing games, which is a big advantage. And if you pair the iPad Air M1 with a controller, the gaming experience is great. But again, I won't recommend to get the M1 iPad Air just for gaming because for that, obviously a dedicated gaming handheld is better. And regarding productivity, you can do good amount of stuff here. Like for example, using Final Cut Pro for iPad is actually a neat experience, and same is the case with light photo editing in Lightroom. All these tasks work great, and I actually do like the experience that the iPad Air M1 offers for these tasks. And here the 8 GB RAM is actually helping here because it's almost like future-proofing the device. But here also, if your core usage is a lot of intense photo editing or video editing, then get a MacBook or any other laptop. Because even though iPads are good at these tasks, it's not a full-on experience you're getting even with the iPad Air M1. And actually the price is also an issue because the starting price for this iPad Air M1 from Apple right now is $599 US, and for that price, you're just getting 64 GB storage, which is too less. And if you want the next option, it has 256 GB storage, but its price is $749 US, which is actually taking the iPad Air into the expensive price territory, just like getting close to the 128 GB base variant iPad Pro. And that's one issue I've noticed with Apple products nowadays. Their pricing is done with so much overlapping, which does push users to spend more. Because with the iPad Air M1, if you're getting it as a device for doing productivity, well then you surely need that 256 GB variant. Now you can connect external SSD through the USB-C port, but there is no proper file management system in the iPad Air, and hence it's not easy to manage video files if you want to do a bit of video editing in Final Cut Pro or DaVinci Resolve. And surely you'll want to do it because here you can plug in this iPad Air to an external monitor and use Stage Manager by connecting external mouse and keyboard, and that experience is pretty good with iPadOS 17. But then, as I said earlier, if the storage in the device is 64 GB, you can't do a lot of these things because you'll fill up the storage quickly. And I feel even 128 GB storage is not that enough, and hence the base variant iPad Pro is also not a great option. And if you compare the 256 GB variant of iPad Air M1 and 256 GB variant of iPad Pro with M2, then again, this iPad Air M1 becomes a better value product. Because here, what this device can do in terms of productivity is almost on par with the M2 iPad Pro. And that's true even with the iPad Pencil usage. Now, this iPad Air doesn't have 120Hz panel or Apple Hover feature, but the Apple Pencil experience you get with this iPad Air is actually solid. I'm not an artist, but I do take handwritten notes, and for that, this iPad Air M1 is a great one, and I feel that the experience with the M2 iPad Pro for taking notes is not going to be a drastic difference. Now, maybe for digital sketching, there will be a big difference, but for normal note taking, this iPad Air is great. And like that, the battery backup is also a strong point for this device. With my moderate usage, I'm getting 2 days of use with the iPad Air M1, and even though this device is almost 2 years old, after usage I usually plug the device for charging at night every other day. And with Wi-Fi range and Bluetooth range, it's good and there was never range issues. And if you're planning to get a SIM supported variant, this iPad Air supports 5G. And for unlocking, there is the fingerprint scanner in the top button, and this scanner is just fine. It's a bit slow, and about accuracy for unlocking, I would say that the accuracy range is in the 80% range. And also, this is not a very heavy device. It weighs 461 grams without any case or sleeves, and that's not that heavy, and also the design is clean. It looks industrial, and here the button quality is good, and I like that Apple is using an aluminum casing, but about the build quality, I have an issue. Now, I'm not sure whether it's just my unit or it's a widespread issue, but with my unit, I can hear a creaking noise from this portion while applying pressure. Well, if you ask me whether that's an issue with day-to-day usage, well, it's not. But then it's a build quality issue factor, and that's one thing I didn't like with this iPad Air. Now, majority of the time, since I always use an Apple Folio case, it's not at all noticeable, but whenever I occasionally use the iPad Air just by itself, it was a bothering thing. And that type of usage happens if I want to do a bit of extra long typing, or if I want to read an ebook. And for both these tasks, the experience is just fine. Because even though the weight is not much, but while holding the iPad Air M1 continuously for over 30 minutes, I usually started to feel hand fatigue. And finally, about these dual speakers, they're pretty good, and that's needed because this iPad doesn't have a headphone jack. Now, I didn't speak anything about the two 12 megapixel cameras this iPad Air M1 has because you're probably not going to use this camera for any intense camera stuff, and the most you're going to use them for are for video calls and scanning documents, and for both these tasks, these cameras are great. But then this front camera placement should have been in the landscape orientation side, because right now with this placement for video calls, you have to hold the iPad like this, which is not the ideal orientation to use the iPad Air M1. So from all this, one thing that should be clear to you is that the iPad Air M1, even now in 2024, is a pretty great iPad. And as I said, if you can get one for a good deal, this is a sure one to get if you want an iPad. And from the Apple's confusing iPad lineup, I think this is the best iPad option for the majority. And I'm pretty sure it will remain to be the same even when the next gen iPad Air comes out, unless Apple adds more features to that device and keeps the same price. Now, Apple might make the base storage of the next gen iPad Air to 128 GB, and surely there will be a spec bump in the processor side to M3 chipset, and both of these things are good upgrades, but other than that, I don't feel there will be any drastic upgrades like a 120Hz display or something. And that's why I said, even after that new launch, this iPad Air should continue to be one of the best iPad options in 2024, because you'll see a lot more deals for this iPad Air, or even you can grab a refurb of this iPad Air for a much more great deal. That's all for this video, guys. Hope you liked it. If so, like is much appreciated. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because you won't miss our future contents. See you again in the next one. Till then, bye.